All right, I have to admit, I just couldn't resist it. Look what I just brought home. This is a 1982 240D, and there's a couple things really unique about this car, and that's why I decided to buy it. Now, this is a classic example of a rolling restoration. Along with this 300D here, I think you're learning that I am a fan of rolling restorations, not complete restorations and not rolling chassis. And without an engine and transmission, it's not going to be very difficult to get it up on that tow dolly. And you can see we got lots of bodies to help today. A month and a half ago, I brought home a W108 rolling chassis, and that's way beyond my time left in my life to restore something like that. And you can't imagine how many stories I hear about people who get these cars and they just tear them all apart, and there they sit for 20, 30 years, and their heirs have to end up liquidating them. I really encourage you, if you want to get into one of these old Mercedes, that you get a rolling restoration. What do I mean by that? That means that you can restore the car and drive it. You never take it so far apart that any time more than a week goes by, you can't get out and drive it. And that's the case with this 1980 300D here and this 1982 240D. 4-speed, okay? And 1983 was the last year they imported these 240Ds into the US. So the one thing I find really unique about this car is it is totally rust-free. That's right, rust-free. This is the most rust-free W123 I have seen in the last 15 years. And I'm going to start with the trunk. I'm going to open up the trunk and let you see what it looks like inside. For an old Benz this old, you're not going to believe how clean this trunk is. Take a look at the spare tire well. Can you believe that? Most of these you'll find rust down in here, you'll find dents. Even the rubber drains here are still soft. But even more than this spare tire well, take a look over at this side well, how clean that is. Almost every 123 will have some rust in that area. When you pull out these liners, you'll usually find rust out right in here. This corner is really typical. Let me show you a scene now from the outside underneath that corner of the rear fender, and look at how clean that is. Now let's go to that 300D, and this is more typical of what you'll see in the lower rear fenders of these W123s. And now look underneath the rear tire area. Of course, the rockers and the jack points are just beautiful on this car, but there's one area that I always see a little bit of rust, even on what are called quote-unquote rust-free cars, and that's this little body seam overlap between the front fender and that panel that goes around underneath the bumper. Moisture always gets down in that seam and you'll see a little bit of rust. And look at this 240D here. There's absolutely nothing on that seam. We're talking zero rust. Now this is what they normally look like on most cars, and in severe cases you'll actually see rust holes in this area. So this thing really passes the rust test. Having a crack-free dash and a rust-free car is very rare. I know some of you are thinking, hey Kent, what's the big deal with rust? I'm sure some of you who live back in the Rust Belt, the upper Midwest to the East Coast, and have had to deal with cars that have been subject to road salt, you'll know what I'm talking about here. It's not a matter that the rust can't be fixed. It's just the pain of working on a rusty car. Everything you touch becomes a problem. Whether you're doing suspension work, rear end replacement, bolts that have to come off that are under the car. But there's also some real safety issues. I've had a number of people say, I don't mind driving these old rusty cars. But there are 2 or 3 areas on the W123 that can be hazardous when the car is excessively rusty. One's a trailing arm and one's the front suspension. I've actually seen front suspensions break and the wheel fall off on extremely rusty W123 chassis. So rust to me is a big deal. And if you can find a rust-free car, you're way ahead of the game. I guarantee it. Now I have to tell you right off front, this isn't a show car. This isn't going to be a show car. This is going to be a driver, a fun driver that you can take anywhere, reliable, You don't care if somebody puts a door ding in it, but it looks nice and you'll never have to be embarrassed by it. And I don't intend in this video to go through everything and show you all the pluses and the minuses, but I am going to shoot a series of videos over the next 1 to 2 months as I get this car ready for its long cross-country road trip. And I'll show you everything I'm going to do to it to make it a safe and reliable driver. So that's my goal. Stay tuned for the next episode in the 240D restoration.